U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio leaves Tel Aviv for Qatar to join President Trump and discuss Gaza ceasefire steps. Palestinian factions in Cairo agree to fully implement the Gaza ceasefire and lift the blockade. And in Lebanon, an Israeli strike in Haruf kills one person despite the ceasefire. Good evening and welcome to Qnews. It's 8 o'clock here in Cairo. I'm Mark Summers. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio departed Tel Aviv, heading to Qatar to join President Donald Trump after meetings in Israel on implementing the Gaza deal and next steps under the ceasefire framework. Rubio arrived in Israel on Thursday and met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem on Friday. He reviewed progress and verification mechanisms for the Gaza ceasefire and humanitarian access, and discussed the mandate for an international security presence in Gaza. Rubio said any force deployed under the accord must be composed of countries Israelis comfortable with, alongside clear command and control and rules of engagement. He then departed Ben Gurion Airport for Doha to brief the president and align positions with regional mediators on sequencing, monitoring, and the timeline for broader stabilization measures. A mass funeral was held in Qnews for the remains of 54 Palestinians returned by Israel under a ceasefire agreement. With hundreds in attendance, many of the deceased detainees were still unidentified at the time of burial. Mourners gathered in Qnews to lay to rest 54 Palestinians whose remains were repatriated under the ceasefire framework. The procession featured flags, prayers, and shrouded bodies carried to a designated cemetery, where local authorities said unidentified remains will be received from across Gaza. Officials added that in coordination with the International Committee of the Red Cross, a specialized laboratory will be established in the coming days to recover, examine, and conduct DNA analysis to help families confirm identities. Community leaders called the reburials a solemn step toward closure for relatives still searching for loved ones, with additional transfers expected under the agreement. During their meeting in Cairo, the Palestinian factions have agreed to fully implement the Gaza ceasefire and lift the blockade entirely, pledging to transfer administration to an independent, technocratic committee and to coordinate next steps with mediators. With Egyptian, Qatari and Turkish mediation, the factions endorsed the second phase of President Trump's plan, committing to a full ceasefire compliance and the complete lifting of the Gaza blockade. Their final communique backs reconstruction, the withdrawal of Israeli forces, and an international monitoring and funding mechanism to oversee delivery and projects. The groups pledged national unity under the Palestine Liberation Organization and condemned Israeli annexation moves in the West Bank. They further expressed appreciation for Egypt's pivotal role and President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's support, saying coordination with partners will continue to translate commitments into timelines and implementation. The Fatah movement has affirmed that the statements issued by several Palestinian factions yesterday underscore that the true guarantor of any unified Palestinian vision is the Palestine Liberation Organization and the State of Palestine. The movement stressed that unilateral policies or attempts to bypass national legitimacy will not succeed. Fatah emphasized the need to establish a professional administrative committee composed of qualified experts to manage Gaza's affairs temporarily under the authority of the Palestinian government. It reiterated that security in Gaza is the responsibility of official Palestinian security forces and any international presence should remain at the borders. The movement also called for a unified authority, weapon and law under a national framework. Egypt has established an integrated network of logistics centres to receive, store and package humanitarian aid bound for Gaza, with 7 major hubs preparing and dispatching convoys under a plan to keep assistance flowing safely and continuously. Cairo says the new logistics network is designed to streamline the full aid cycle from intake and warehousing to packaging and loadout before convoys move to Gaza. 7 primary hubs are now dedicated to preparing and directing shipments under a centralised plan that prioritises safety, steady throughput and predictable scheduling. Officials say the system standardises receipt and packing processes to reduce delays, maintain cold chain and critical care supplies and support sustained convoy operations. The approach is intended to stabilise flows over time and ensure aid reaches medical facilities and communities as needs persist. That comes as 2,062 aid trucks have entered the Gaza Strip between October 18th and the 23rd. The World Health Organization moved 238 pallets of medical supplies into Gaza through Kerem Abu Salem, delivering insulin, cholera kits, assistive devices and other essential medicines as part of an expanded emergency push. The WHO says the convoy carried infection prevention control equipment, medical consumables and assistive devices alongside critical drugs like insulin. Health Emergency Officer Dario Bartetto said the shipment is aimed at sustaining overstretched facilities amid persistent shortages. The agency adds it has more than 2,000 additional pallets staged for dispatch via Jordan, Egypt, Dubai, the West Bank and Jerusalem, pending clearances and security access. The aid delivery is part of a wider effort to stabilise primary care and hospital services, manage outbreaks and support chronic patients who have struggled to access treatment. The WHO says further movements are ready once corridors and logistics align. And now let's go over to Mona, who's in our newsroom. Mona.
Thank you so much, Mark. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the advisor at the Center for Strategic Studies of the Armed Forces and expert in regional security, Major General Dr. Rubio. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. And following the Cairo talks, what diplomatic measures can transform the commitment to end the blockade and withdraw Israeli troops into a concrete, time-bound and enforceable plan? Hello.
Okay, first of all, the last week's witnesses intensive Egyptian effort and movement regarding the Palestinian issue, with focusing on Gaza Strip, and this effort proceed by 3 levels: the presidential level, security level, and humanitarian level, and all of this level was working with to establishing or to consolidate the ceasefire in Gaza Strip and to continue the part 2 phase of the plan, Trump plan. Okay, and these days we witness some of the movement in Israel. For example, the Knesset in Israel wants to size Rafah, the eastern bank, and this is make a trouble with the United States. And this is something you can say is very wrong. It's very wrong, and it sees that they will not be contempt with this plan.
Right. General Rabia, in practical terms, how will the promised handover to an independent technocratic body function, and under whose jurisdiction will it fail within both the PLO and the Palestinian Authority?
The Palestinian faction issued 2 days ago a statement that they are agree with Fatah, with a committee, a technocrat committee, and they are already agree with a name of the person here in Egypt. But Fatah today make a statement which is, I think it will not be good for Hamas or other faction, is a Palestinian faction here in Egypt. About the committee, they are agree with the committee, technocrat committee, and the names. And Fatah says that they will have to be under control of Palestinian Authority. And of course, this will not be good for Israel and the United States. And the United States, uh, Witkoff and Kushner, of course. This is number one. Number two, Fatah also say that the security on the Gaza Strip must be on the control of Palestinian Authority or Fatah Authority, and of course Hamas will not agree with this this issue, of course. All of this issue, I think it will give a bad indication about the next 3 or 4 days to discuss this issue, especially with General Hassan Rashad, discuss all of these issues with Fatah and Hamas. And after that, and with Hussein al-Sheikh himself was talking with General Hassan al-Sheikh about these things, and they are agree. After that, they give a statue like that, and they will make a trouble with Hamas and other Palestinian faction.
Right. Then, from your point of view, what is Fatah's strategy for security management in Gaza, and who will be in command? And how will security forces be integrated, and what steps will be taken to avoid overlapping chains of command?
No, they are talking about, they are agree that there is an international troops. They are agree with international troops, but they say that the international troop will be out of Gaza Strip. This is number one. Number two is must be with from national council, security council give a statement of these troops. So it's, I think that will be a very hard. The control of this international troops. There are no agreement so far about the commander, the number one, and who will be in this international troops from in these troops. Also, Indonesia, I think they offered about 20,000 person to be in this troop, and this is all of these issues was discussed until now. There is no decision so far about these international troops.
Speaking about the Palestinian national reconciliation that is taking place, what is the planned order of steps for establishing a unified leadership, agreeing on shared political platform, and moving towards election?
Of course, there must be an election. There must be an elections from Palestinian Gaza Strip also, and I think the time is not good so far to be. They are not ready to do these things.
But indeed, and this is why I was asking you, sir, what steps should be taken in order to achieve such a stage?
Of course, this is okay. There is an instability in the Gaza so far. There is no control, real command on Gaza Strip except Hamas. Let's be frankly talks. Hamas now is control Gaza Strip, and nobody says something uh, say something else. But this is, of course, make Israel and the United States unhappy about this. The authorities, Palestinian Authority, must have an election during these days or next months to do another command for the Palestinian Authority. And I think from this environment which we are seeing in Eastern Bank and the Gaza Strip, it's very difficult to do this election.
Right, and this is why Egypt is exerting its utmost effort in order to come out with an outcome of those reconciliation. Egypt is hosting, and that was Major General Dr. Wael Rabia from Cairo, the advisor at the Center for Strategic Studies of the Armed Forces and expert in regional security. We thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews. And now back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mona. I want to Selhi there in our newsroom. Now to Lebanon, where people expected the wreckage of a car hit by an Israeli strike in the southern Lebanese village of Haruf, where Lebanon's health ministry says one person was killed and another wounded. The latest incident despite a declared ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Emergency crews and residents converged on Haruf after an Israeli strike destroyed a vehicle, leaving one dead and one injured. That's according to Lebanon's health ministry. Local officials said the blast rattled nearby homes and drew a rapid security response as investigators documented the scene. The strike is the latest reported flare-up along the frontier despite a ceasefire arrangement between Israel and Hezbollah, with both sides trading accusations of violations and infiltration attempts. Monitoring groups have urged restraint and clearer de-confliction channels to prevent escalation. Authorities in southern Lebanon advise residents to avoid impact sites until unexploded bombs checks are complete, while healthcare teams treated the wounded and transferred the body for identification. At a London press conference with the Coalition of the Willing, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said diplomacy matters only when it can lead to real decisions, and thanked partners for new sanctions put on Russia. Zelensky used the London forum to push for deeper pressure on Moscow and expanded strike capability, arguing that long-range weapons are essential to force meaningful talks. He welcomed fresh sanctions steps and called for broader measures on Russian oil and assets, alongside accelerated air defense support. The Ukrainian leader said real leverage, sanctions, long-range capabilities, political pressure and accountability must underpin any diplomacy with the Kremlin. Allies signalled openness to additional missile support and tighter economic pressure, with further proposals expected in the coming days. Zelensky added that the more losses Russia suffers at home, the faster Moscow will agree to substantive negotiations.
Saving the lives in Kyiv, and has not taken by force. Of course, that is a complete nonsense.
As you were just hearing, European leaders and NATO's chief vowed tougher sanctions on Russia and faster delivery of long-range strike and air defense systems to Ukraine. That's after the Coalition of the Willing meeting in London, with the UK announcing thousands of additional missiles. At the joint London briefing, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof, Denmark's Mette Frederiksen, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte and President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged to step up sanctions and speed weapons to Kyiv. The coalition said it will work to phase Russian oil and gas out of global markets and channel frozen Russian assets into Ukraine's reconstruction. Starmer said Britain has fully sanctioned Russian hydrocarbons and will provide more than 5,000 lightweight multi-role missiles, with 140 delivered ahead of schedule. Leaders also flagged accelerated air defense deliveries and longer-range capability, framing pressure on Moscow as essential to deter further strikes and force meaningful talks. Ukrainian firefighters extinguished a blaze at a food warehouse in Kyiv after overnight Russian missile strikes across Ukraine that left at least 3 people dead. That's according to local authorities. The authorities say Russia launched missiles and drones overnight, igniting a major fire at a Kyiv warehouse and causing casualties in several regions. Kyiv officials reported fatalities and multiple injuries in the capital after a pre-dawn blast. Emergency crews contained the blaze and cleared debris. Nationwide, at least 3 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded, with damage to civilian facilities under review. The attacks come as Ukraine urges allies for additional air defense systems ahead of winter and continues repairs to critical infrastructure. Investigations into impact sites and unexploded ordnance are underway, with further updates expected from local administrations. Meanwhile, Russia says it downed a Ukrainian Su-27 and seized 10 settlements over the past week. Russia's defense ministry claimed control of 10 settlements across multiple sectors and said mass strikes drones. Moscow also reported intercepting 1 Su-27, 4 cruise missiles, 18 aerial bombs, 15 HIMARS rockets and 1,441 UAVs. Ukraine's General Staff said 82 combat engagements took place, naming the Pokrovsk axis as the most active. Both sides reported continued artillery and drone attacks along the line. The battlefield claims could not be independently verified, and neither side released comprehensive casualty figures. Russia released images it says shows Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov inspecting a command center for forces near Ukraine's eastern stronghold of Pokrovsk, claiming he reviewed the completion of combat tasks. The Defense Ministry published footage purportedly depicting Gerasimov touring a forward command site and briefing officers on operations around Pokrovsk. In an accompanying statement, Moscow said he checked the execution of assigned combat missions and discussed force posture and logistics. The ministry did not disclose the visit's timing or location details. An independent verification of the images or battlefield claims was not immediately possible. Ukraine has reported heavy fighting on the Pokrovsk axis in recent days, while both sides continue artillery and drone strikes along the front. Used fishing nets in Breton ports in western France are being collected and shipped to Ukraine to shield roads and military sites from Russian drones. A second life meant to save lives on the front line. Volunteer groups and harbour communities in Brittany are packing end-of-life trawling nets for Ukraine, where engineers stretch net tunnels over key routes to snag FPV drones and protect convoys and checkpoints. Similar European efforts have expanded this year as anti-drone netting spreads along frontline roads. While not foolproof, commanders say the low-tech barriers have helped blunt strikes, especially against fibre-optic guided drones that can't be jammed. Polls have opened in Abidjan for Côte d'Ivoire's presidential election, with incumbent Alassane Ouattara, who's been in power since 2011, the clear favourite, as key opposition figures are barred from the ballot. Voting began Saturday in the commercial capital and nationwide under tight security, capping a tense campaign dominated by the president and the bid for a fourth term. Authorities set opening at 8 a.m. local time this morning, with long queues reported at several sites. Major rivals were excluded by the Constitutional Council, splintering the opposition field. Observers are watching turnout, incidents at polling centres, and the pace of results from the Electoral Commission in the hours ahead. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan urged supporters to vote as she closed her campaign ahead of the October 29th polls, from which main opposition parties are barred, telling a Zanzibar rally security forces will ensure safe participation. Wrapping her final rally in Zanzibar, the president appealed for strong turnout in Sunday's vote and reassured supporters that Tanzania's security and defence forces are prepared to safeguard the process. The election goes ahead with main opposition parties barred from participating, leaving the incumbent and allied candidates facing a fragmented field. Hassan framed the vote as a test of stability and urged citizens to cast ballots without fear. Authorities say access controls and policing will be in place at polling centres, with campaigning now concluded. Attention shifts to logistics, voter turnout, and post-poll announcements from the electoral authorities. Dozens of supporters of Cameroon's ruling party marched in southwestern city of Buea, calling for calm and rejecting electoral violence ahead of Sunday's opposition protest. The demonstration, organised by President Paul Biya's Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, urged citizens to reject hate speech and unrest. It came amid mounting tension following opposition leaders' claim of victory in the October 12 election and his call for supporters to protest peacefully tomorrow. Authorities have yet to confirm whether the opposition gathering will be authorized. While ruling party lawmakers said the march aimed to promote unity, some residents question why opposition events face tighter restrictions. Well, before we go, just time to recap the main headlines this evening. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio leaves Tel Aviv for Qatar to join President Trump. Palestinian factions in Cairo agree to fully implement the Gaza ceasefire and lift the blockade. And in Lebanon, an Israeli strike in Haruf kills one person despite the ceasefire. And for more stories and live updates, you can follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEGY. Thanks very much for watching this evening, and have a very nice rest of your Saturday night.